What's the best case of instant karma you've ever witnessed? The company I work for requires you to pass a series of tests to be considered for employment. First test is general knowledge, just to drop out people who aren't that bright. I took my tests with 30 other people that day and 20 of them failed this test. 10 left. Second test was general knowledge and a further 7 people failed the test, leaving just 3 people left. The tests take a total of 8 hours and there are breaks in between. We were not allowed to leave the building during testing. If we had to leave, then we would have to reschedule the tests for another day. Me and the other 2 guys were stuck there together for the rest of the day, so we got to talking in between tests. One guy was older, maybe in his mid-50s early 60s, and was bragging about how easy the tests were and couldn't believe 27 people failed. The other dude was my age at the time, pretty young for the job we were applying for. He was nervous and seemed happy he made it through the first 2 tests. As I studied for the test, there was one that I wasn't sure about. I knew I would have a hard time with that one, and when they put out the docket for tests I saw the hard one would be the last one on the list. My plan was to pass 4 of the tests and reschedule the 5th to give me more time to study. All 3 of us passed the 3rd test and I had to listen to the old man gloat about how easy it was when the young guy and myself lamented it was harder than we thought. The young man said he knew all the math parts, but the theory and hardware parts would be the most difficult for him. I said the math would be hard for me, but I was confident with the hardware stuff. I was bluffing, of course. I studied using old Navy manuals that didn't have anything about newer hardware, so I was ignorant to that stuff. I too was strong in the math part because I found out we would be able to use calculators and my father-in-law gifted me a scientific calculator. The old man called us both stupid if we thought that was hard and was in for a shock if we actually got the job. I sit down for test 4 thinking it was the math test according to the docket, but when I opened the book I found out it wasn't. It was the hardware test. I raised my hand and asked to reschedule because of the mix-up, and she said that was impossible after I opened the booklet. I freaked out. My whole life was riding on this test. I moved here for the job, and if I didn't get it I wouldn't be able to afford an apartment. I calmed myself and just tried to answer using context clues and deductive reasoning. After the test I asked the young guy how he did and he said he was sure he failed it. I said me too. This launched the old man into a tirade about how he has worked in this industry for 25 years and if I thought the tests were hard now then I was going to never make it in real life. This went on for 20 minutes about how my generation was weak and stupid and he feared for the future. He said he knew that test like the back of his hand. As you can probably guess, the old man failed. And me and the young guy passed. He didn't say a word and just got up and walked out. I didn't say a word either. I just smiled as he left. Now, this instant karma was twofold. After the old man left, the other young guy went off laughing and making fun of him. Talking about how we got this since we had our calculators, and he was talking about how he hopes we work together and how cool of a story it would be. He went to the payphone and called his girlfriend and told her that he was in, that he was going to pass and that she can start looking for a new house and everything. He had his calculator out playing with it while we waited for the last test. It was a graphing calculator. I was bad in math in high school, so I never took high-level math, but my friends did, and I loved playing with their graphing calculators. I looked at it for a minute and something hit me. Holy crap, this calculator didn't have scientific functions on it at all. He assumed since it was so fancy it did, but it didn't. I told him this and he went white. What do you mean, he said. So I showed him in my old beat-up calculator how I do number conversions and he didn't have the buttons to do it. Now, being the over-preparing dude I am, I learned how to do it on paper in the event we couldn't use calculators. He was not so studious. So I tried to give him a crash course on how to do it on paper and write out number lines and all that. He wasn't getting it. I said maybe he should ask to reschedule and get another calculator. He suggested I give him mine since I knew how to do it on paper. Man, you are cool and all, but I just met you. I'm not good at math and this is the rest of my life we are taking about. I'm sorry, I need mine. He refused to reschedule, saying he got this far and would be fine. He failed. But silver lining, the 4 tests he passed qualified him for another job that paid almost the same, but it was not as good and the one we were going for. I got the job and have been here for 19 years now. Do you regret losing your virginity? I was always a confident guy around strangers. Behind a facade of confidence and jokes was a scared and anxiety-ridden guy. I don't use that term lightly. It was for this purpose that I liked older women. I'm not talking about hooking up with 45-year-old cougars, but 17 to 20 was perfect. I looked and acted older, and it usually got me some action but not all the way. People my age never really could understand me. So I met C at a mutual friend's house. During this time, I wasn't interested in knowing them as I had heard of them before. I decided I was done with my advancements with older women and was ready to grow up. Moron. She was pretty, funny, smart, and sassy. But I didn't give her anything when she flirted. I just brush it off and continue talking with my friend. Come to find out, she couldn't stop talking about me to our mutual friend and got my snap. I added her back, and we chatted sometimes. I admit it was nice to talk to her. She was a good conversation. She and my friends had a falling out, which I knew, but she told me to keep our relationship secret. I didn't see the harm, and we continued to talk. She was pretty, but I could tell there was a facade there. You can't bullshit a bullshitter. We hung out for the first time. She picked me up as I didn't have my license yet, and she was happy too. We would be innocent. Grab an ice cream and go to the beach. Go for a walk in the park. C was nice company. I found out later that she was really cruel to my friend when they were at uni together, that she lied about personal things and would be nice to me and a conceited bick to my friend. I don't know why, but I didn't believe my friend when she said that C was nuts. I'm sorry, this is a long story. So now I had to keep our relationship a secret from my friend and my family, who had met C on one occasion. I started to like her, which was wrong, but think about it. 16, an older girl of 20 was willing to pick me up and hang out. It felt nice. Soon we started to not be so innocent. And we did it. I'd done stuff with other girls, nothing major, but at the time, I didn't regret it. She enjoyed herself and told me, which I now think was a way of keeping me on a string. When she would pick me up, I'd tell everyone I was with someone else. Constantly lying was getting to me. I was sick of being that guy. The guy you keep her friends away from because you're afraid that they'll get together and a relationship would be ruined. I hated it. So I blew her off, and she wrote me a letter. By this time, I'd known her for a full 3 months. In the letter was classic delusional character writing. I love you. I've never met anyone like you, and I can't live without you. Full BS. She had a job, and friends were going to uni, and her home life was good. She wanted to keep me on a string. I broke it off completely. My friends and family still don't know I used to talk to her. I want to change, and I am. But I can't take what was coerced out of me. I wish I was still a virgin, and I didn't lose it to a 20-year-old nutcase. What kind of parent forgets to pick up their kid from school? I know this one. I got a call from the school one day, 15 minutes after pickup was due. They were angry at me. Very angry. I had not picked my child up. They had also assumed that, because I was a woman, I was the one who would do the mothering things, like picking the kid up from school. You know, because I was just going to yoga and the dog groomer while my husband pulled in the big bucks? Private schools, man. Those people are weird. As it turned out, her father was the one whose job allowed him to leave over his lunch break and do pick up on this half day at school. But he'd forgotten. Maybe got sucked into a game in the break room or was having a conversation with a coworker or had a sudden overwhelming lust for a fast food meal that he'd stop wanting as soon as he opened the bag. See, my kid's father has an executive function disorder. That's a term for a specific set of malfunctions in the prefrontal cortex, which governs behavior and allows us to rank and recall priorities. Everybody starts life with a crappy prefrontal cortex. In people with executive function disorders, the development of that part of the brain lags behind typically developing children and never entirely catches up, even in adulthood. When he was a child in school, my husband was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. His parents ignored the diagnosis and punished him for his poor grades by canceling all of his extracurriculars and making him drop out of sports. He went on to barely manage his adulthood, until the point where he couldn't. Eventually, he went to a psychiatrist and got re-diagnosed. First he tried stimulant medications, and that helped him remember things, but he was angry all the time. Now he takes antidepressants, and he is calmer. Still forgetful and downright strange at, for instance, the ways he performs household chores. He rarely puts things away in the same place twice, and if an item has 2 parts, he never puts them in the same drawer, but he's no longer cripplingly afraid of trying tasks. One of the effects of his executive function disorder is his inability to keep track of time. ADHD is sometimes described as a temporal disability. Likewise, he does not have a sense of space or distance. He struggles to follow step-by-step driving directions and refuses to look at a map because they make me panic. He never got the difference between left and right figured out. He cannot estimate with any degree of accuracy the amount of time it will take to commute from one location to another, even if it's his regular, daily commute. He does not understand how locations relate to one another. I once fell asleep as we approached our apartment from the south at the end of a road trip, and woke up 20 minutes west of our apartment, because he saw a sign for the road he grew up on and that felt familiar and safe, so he detoured to the other end of the county. Oftentimes, as we are leaving our neighborhood, I have to remind him that the direction we are going requires him to aim the car in the opposite direction of what he has just done. Sometimes he remembers to buy me a present for Christmas or my birthday. Other times he doesn't, and when he sees the other presents come out, he goes into a panic and starts yelling for me to come help him figure it out. He appeals to me to reassure him that it's fine. I don't do this. It's not fine. I understand that he's not forgetting things on purpose, but that doesn't mean the things are unforgotten. My husband is lost in time and space. These are strange dimensions that he does not have the ability to navigate. Most of us navigate with an internal clock, an internal compass, an internal map of all the places that our little worlds touch. To him, the rest of us are like flocks of birds or schools of fish. Somehow, we all know how and when and where to move. With a great deal of repetition, he can adapt himself to form new habits. He can learn a new commute. He can adjust himself to a new daily schedule. But if his routine is disrupted, by any kind of distraction at all, such as a manager coming by his desk to talk to him right at close of business or an interesting article popping up on his phone, he loses his tenuous grip on his awareness of what he's supposed to do next. This is where the fast food impulse comes in. For people with an executive function disorder, a new idea becomes an imperative that drowns out all other priorities. Even I want French fries drowning out my daughter is waiting for me at school. These are the parents who forget to pick up their kids from school, the parents who leave the baby in the hot car, the spouses who forget the birthday, the guests who always arrive late. Not all of them have ADHD or another diagnosed executive function disorder. Some of them have a condition and never get diagnosed. Some of them don't have enough of the diagnostic criteria to neatly fall into a category of disability, but still have enough for it to interfere with their lives. Some of them have substance abuse issues that create similar disruptions in those automatic patterns and senses and knowledge resources in the brain. And poverty, war, chronic pain, and other major stressors can cause anybody's brain to begin to glitch out in these ways. The people who forget to pick their kids up from school are caught between the incomprehensible chaos that is society and the world, and their own rigid coping habits. They don't love their kids any less than the other parents. They don't misunderstand the consequences of leaving their child alone at school with employees who are already supposed to be somewhere else. But their lack of malice doesn't make it okay. At the time I met my husband, he was happily and intently focused on his college studies. He told me, dismissively, that every energetic boy in the 90s got diagnosed with AD. He had believed what his parents and teachers told him, that he was a smart kid who just wasn't trying hard enough. And suddenly, in college, it was a lot easier to try. He could skip class to play video games and nobody would call his parents about it. He could write a long, rambling paper that showed he'd studied and understood the material, and the teacher would forgive his missed assignments. His mom still drove him to the dentist, and an inheritance from his grandfather covered tuition. Everything felt fine. And so everything was fine. Until it wasn't, until he had to follow an employer's work schedule, pay bills regularly, keep a house clean, be attentive to new members of his family. Until he was supposed to pick up his kid from school. And everything collapsed. There are many people who think that ADHD isn't a real disorder, or that you should never medicate for it. The truth is, there are close to 8 billion people on this planet, and a hefty percentage of them are not operating at or above the average. Of course they aren't. That's what an average is. A large part of the population will fall below it. Some of those people fall below it because their brain function makes it very, very hard for them to behave the way that society needs everyone to behave.